Thunderstruck by Merlos the Mad. Chapter 8 The Cat Did It. Stephanie gazed down flatly at Sweetie Belle for a good few minutes, disbelief winning over the better half of her mind. I still just can't bring myself to accept what I'm seeing, she thought plainly. And what I'm seeing is an active, home-built robot that shouldn't have any power whatsoever, sitting in the basement. Stephanie looked up, frowning, and shifted her stare to the porch where a couple of cats were laying in the sun. Or rather, I wouldn't be seeing said robot if it was still in the basement. Then I wouldn't see it until I walked down there and saw it still without power. Her thoughts were a mess over the turn of events she had come home to. The robot, Sweetie Belle, her own prized creation, was currently defying logic for the second consecutive day. She, or it rather, was right there on the foot of her house's stairs, looking up, shuffling its hooves, and apparently fully operational, with perhaps the exception of her singed mane and tail. Slowly, Stephanie's hand came up and pressed against the side of her head. Then she scrunched her eyes shut. Maybe I hadn't de-stressed as much as I thought I did. Briefly, the idea to simply leave again rose. But her animals were going to need her attention eventually, so that doesn't seem like a great idea. Stephanie? Sweetie's charming voice called out questioningly. Stephanie's eyes shot open again, while the rest of her took an instinctive step back. Are you malfunctioning, Stephanie? Sweetie Belle politely asked, her expression, if one could call her simple robotic features capable of one, made a good show of appearing concerned. I believe I am also having difficulties internally. Could you perhaps help me if I could help you? Also, I have questions, inquiries. While speaking, the robot gestured to and fro with one front hoof. What is baked beans? Also, what does it mean to Harlem Shake? Also, why is it that my body is the way it is? Also, the cat is evil and mean. Please have it behave not evil. I'd be very grateful for that last one. The presence of various animals surrounding the house filled the awkward silence. The goat munched on feed while two dogs barked incessantly at one another nearby, amongst other sounds. Stephanie, meanwhile, gaped openly. I, she muttered, breathless and shaken. This can't be possible. How is she even on? Did someone reactivate her? The thought was in response to a voice that solemnly reminded her of the growing list of unexplainable occurrences surrounding Sweetie Belle. Someone else couldn't be responsible, unless they had a way around GLaDOS, which didn't seem likely. The possibilities Stephanie busily considered threatened to drive her mad. Make her doubt her. Oh, drive her mad, make her doubt herself. In legitimate fashion, she worried in earnest over the state of her own very sanity. Did someone add wireless and remote controls to Sweetie without my knowing? Aliens? The government? The entire drive home had been spent resolving to attempt to puzzle her situation out calmly and rationally. But even after telling herself she would investigate the circumstances with an open mind, she was having difficulty accepting or even grasping the situation, which was her own robotic little pony. Sweetie Belle had tilted its head slightly while Stephanie fought to speak. The movement tossed the remaining tuft of mane it bore from one side of its head to the other. Stephanie, it began to say again, still using its cutesy young voice. Stephanie nearly took another step back. Her robot's tone held a very odd quality, one that rivaled the concerned tone it had already used. Sadness? Concerned tone it had already used. Sadness. But please respond, Stephanie, Sweetie Belle begged, then stood up and moved forwards, gears turning softly. Yeah. I have tried to ask questions of everyone and thing in the house, but they won't talk coherently to me. I need you to help. His mouth moved up and down, roughly in time with her speaking, though it wasn't perfect. I am very confused. Sweetie came to a full stop at Stephanie's feet, then held up a foreleg and placed it on her knees. Please? Stephanie stared a moment longer. She couldn't help it, but rather than stand still forever, she managed to bend over and lean towards Sweetie. The machine looked the same as always, minus the damage it suffered just the day before, though technically the storm had been early that morning. Her head swirled around quickly, looking for the camera crew she knew must be out there somewhere. Other than her animals, though, there was no one else in the general vicinity. Stephanie looked back at Sweetie Belle, then answered, Baked beans are disgusting. The Harlem Shake is something you never mention in polite company. Your body is like that because I'm cheap, and cats. She had started speaking before she knew it, and wiped a hand down the front of her face in exasperation. Cats are just animals, they don't know any better. She sighed out, then lowered her hand. Sweetie Belle stared up at her still, then blinked and spoke again. Oh, okay, she said, smiled and again, and added, Why? Her voice was sweet, innocent, and very curious sounding. Stephanie blinked for a moment. She ran a hand over Sweetie's mane, smiling, then jumped up. All right, where the hell are you creeps, huh? Come out of the bushes now so I can sue you already for messing with my property. She glared all around her and almost missed the surprised sound Sweetie made upon being tipped over, which was followed by a dull cling. Oof! Stephanie, what did you do that for? I could have been hurt, I think. Sweetie Belle had fallen on her side and was looking up in a mildly indignant look. You didn't answer my question. I have more, too, numbering 1114. Stephanie looked back at Sweetie Belle, face working to find the right expression. She gave her yard another glance, then knelt down and picked up Sweetie. 14? She asked in a desperate tone. It was odd, but talking back to Sweetie actually felt like a little normal, and easier than facing her thoughts or logic, at least so long as she tried not to think of it as her machine that had previously had a very limited vocabulary. Sweetie shuffled its legs about her slightly before being righted, then looked at Stephanie. Thank you, it exclaimed, then sat again. Which 14? Did you wish to know about question 14 or question 1114, Stephanie? They are different questions, so I think you may be confused. I was just referring to question 1000. Stephanie interrupted, talking over Stephanie. That's, yes, quite alright. Sweetie? Okay, let's go inside. Is that alright? I need to get back to work and figure everything out. And, well, I can't do that out here. Does that sound great? No, no question answering just yet, if that's fine. Sweetie Belle leaned back some, its head bobbing quickly from one side to the other in a thoughtful fashion. Inside? It asked. then turned towards the house. Inside is acceptable. The cat was rendered a non... Oh, inside is acceptable. The cat was rendered a non-threat. After excessive amounts of aggressive behavior were witnessed, unit designated Sweetie forced was forced to to Sweetie Belle paused, shook her head, then continued. I am sorry, Stephanie. Focusing? She repeated. Focusing is so hard for me. So I put the cat in quarantine. We can go inside and be safe now. Stephanie had listened intently before being confused by the short speech implemented, then widened her eyes to the fullest after what her robot had said dawned on her. The cat? She asked, then raised her voice. You mentioned a cat before. What did you do to my cat? Which cat? Sweetie, oddly enough, backed up quickly as if worried through really everything it did was odd. Well, the cat was attacking me and being really mean, and I put her in the closet. It was attacking me, and he was the one with black spots and white tummy, belly, stomach, chest, chest. Chess is a game, Sweetie Belle finished, then smiled, but only just. Stephanie exhaled slowly, not really sure how to react about her robot telling her that it had quarantined her cat. If that was the worst she randomly activated ghost machines had done, then that was fine. The idea that Sweetie could hurt any of the animals, even malfunctioning like she was, didn't seem likely. What bothered Stephanie more, surprisingly enough, even to her, was the glitches Sweetie was now exhibiting. I see. You're mixing up your pronouns, by the way, Sweetie. Having pointed out a few simple and understandable flaws, Stephanie had worked up to a more difficult issue. In this case for her, the issue is actually addressing her machine. Are you feeling alright, Sweetie? Besides acting not yourself, you don't sound very good. After a brief pause, she quickly and hopefully said, Status report? It was a brief glimmer of hope that the voice command would work. Sweetie Belle's metal eyelids opened up some in a very believable look of surprise. Sound? Do I not sound right? I do not know how I should sound, Stephanie. Do I sound correctly? The hope Stephanie had that Sweetie would answer normally had been suddenly dashed. So she wrinkled her face up in thought, charging ahead. No, Sweetie, that's not what I meant. She thought on her machine's words for a moment, noticing something. Sound isn't used like that. You meant to say, how do I speak correctly? I think, anyway. Sweetie Belle stared a moment, then made an understanding tone. Oh, I get it now. Stephanie waited and waited, then finally said, Well, why was your voice glitching then? Is it the same reason that you're acting differently? I can't believe you're actually talking to it, her thoughts piped in. Quiet, brain. I'm trying to figure this out and you're not helping. Get back to work. Her thoughts did a terrible job of helping to cope, even less so as events progressed further. Sweetie Belle blinked, then extended a hoof up in the air, rotating it around in a wide circular arch. Oh, you mean the scrambles? Stephanie furrowed her brow again, resisting the urge to either facepalm or walk away right there. Um, yes, the scrambles. What's causing those? Are they you've not been why you've been acting strange? She swallowed and waited for a response, which came quicker than she had expected one to. Sweetie Belle began shaking her head back and forth vigorously. I'm not acting strange. I'm not acting. I'm serious. Everyone in the house is strange. They're so rude. Yes, they're rude. I tried being friendly, but it didn't help. TV didn't talk to me, GLaDOS wouldn't talk to me, and the animals just avoided me. Except for Cat. Cat was mean. Broken Little TV was nice, I guess, but she just played music. Sweetie finished, then sat down again, looking around every few seconds before focusing back on Stephanie and continuing. I'm just confused. Nothing makes sense. There's so much, I think. That makes no sense. Words, feelings, and... Stephanie stopped Sweetie Belle before she could say more. Before she was getting ahead of things quickly. Because she was getting ahead of things quickly. Wait, okay. Way too much, too fast. First of all, though, you can't feel things. Yes, I can, Sweetie interjected, looking up flatly. What I feel is feelings. The definitions match. Unless I'm wrong. Am I wrong, Stephanie? I believe you, and change my dictionary had telling me. In a bizarre fashion, Sweetie leaned forwards and began whispering rather than talking at normal volume. I don't think it, he knows what they think they're talking about, but I can't be sure. Stephanie flexed her hands in pure, unbridled stress. Your pronouns, Sweetie, and arg! She thumped a hand against her forehead, suddenly relieving the madness that had filled her entire life since the thunderstorm had set Sweetie on fire. Okay, Stephanie started again, but slowly this time. Let's just say, for now, you do have feelings, because you have, well, an opinion. We'll call it that, I guess. Whatever the reason for that, we'll ignore for now. Yeah, Sweetie Belle said, but remained seated, waiting. Stephanie quickly resolved to remember very little detail of how things moved along. If there was someone behind the scenes pulling the strings, she wanted to be sure to know everything. Second, you can't just mix and match pronouns. They're based on gender in English. For example, I would be a she, and you would be a it. Be an it. Sweetie Belle tilted its head. Why? She asked. I thought I would be a she. Not sure why, but she feels more familiar. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Well, aren't you just an adorable little pile of confusing? Because reasons, that's why, she replied, then paused for a second. Familiar? She repeated the word in her head, then shook it. Anyway, what's making you glitch? You said there was something that caused that. Her thought process was simply that she had asked the right questions. Maybe she could get real answers. Sweetie Belle was quiet for a moment, looking down, then looked back up in a flash. Oh, I woke up Hal, and he tried to hurt me the first time I met him. hurt me bad. I didn't like it. It was approximately 12 hours and she stopped and shook slightly, tossing her mane back and forth. Sorry, she apologized, looking back up. I keep thinking about the time files, or so the TV said. Sweetie Belle stopped to laugh a little, then went on. Sorry, I'm confused. I woke up Howl again, or is it reactivated? Both definitions match, but I don't know what to use. So I somethinged Hal again and tried to talk to him. I tried to ask him questions. I have a lot of those, Stephanie. Sorry for repeating myself. It. Is Hal an it, Stephanie? Stephanie stared at Sweetie Belle, mouth hung agape. After a tense moment of silence, she nodded dumbly. Oh, Sweetie said plainly. I was certain it was a he, not a she. Certainly, but maybe a he. Oh well, so it confused me. Hal, I mean. Yes, confused me more, which didn't help. I felt things when talking to him with the data cord and getting lost. It felt like I almost didn't get back. I think, yes, definitely. I feel a lot of things, Stephanie. Sweetie Belle sat quietly for a moment, apparently finished with speaking, then looked towards the house. Did you still want to go inside? It's not that cold out, but the weather forecast said it might rain. I don't know why that matters, but it seems like being outside for the rain is bad. I found a faucet earlier and decided I didn't like water. Stephanie just replied to her machine quietly. Yeah, okay, let's go inside and I'll... Stephanie stared into space a moment, shifting through the madness she had half listened to in her slight delirium. One part of what she heard stood out. Wait, you fixed Hal? In a flash, she knelt down again and then picked up Sweetie. So much had happened and been said, Stephanie didn't quite feel as though it had all clicked. Exactly. Hearing the Hal was okay, though, brought her back somewhat. Her list of things that were just wrong was a mile long, but she still tried to remember everything in vivid detail. Sweetie Belle gasped open as she was raised into the air. I'm flying! She remarked immediately. Whee! Wait, no, flying has an odd definition. I'm being carried. She let out a depressed tone, then, disappointing. Stephanie groaned and paused long enough to clench her eyes shut. Please stay focused, sweetie. I... Oh, never mind. I'll just go check on Hal real quick, then come back upstairs and deal with Sweetie. Somehow I've got to ask about every crazy little nonsense thing she said. I mean, I know I considered it, but I won't believe that she is actually alive. Stephanie's thoughts froze solid the moment she opened her front door, revealing the inside of her kitchen. What the hell happened to my house? She cried out. Something wiggled in Stephanie's arms, but she barely noticed that slight disturbance. Nearly everything, small or large, had been tipped over, and owning a house full of animals meant that happened a lot. However, this was far worse than any time she had forgotten to put away the raccoons. No, her house was in absolute shambles from top to bottom. Chairs were toppled over, drawers were opened everywhere, a lamp was shattered by the couch, and those were just the first things she noticed. For instance, the toaster was inexplicably laying on the floor, along with what must be half the books in the house. Sweetie Belle spoke up all of a sudden. Sweetie, Stephanie, how do you reformat the house? She suffered catastrophic malfunction earlier this afternoon. The room was quiet for a moment, while Stephanie merely continued to evaluate the full extent of the destruction of her home. Absently, she wondered how far it ran. The broken little TV, her little thoughts repeated, recalling the hints that Sweetie had left her during this confusing speech. Those hints, she realized, had actually been a prophecy that had been foretold of the doom and destruction she was destined to find strewn throughout her home. Sweetie spoke up again, interrupting Stephanie's thoughts, and quietly added, "Also, the cat did it." Stephanie opened the closet door, only for Mr. Whiskers to come flying out, letting out a single yowl of protest as he raced between her legs and off down the hallway. "Oh, you poor little guy," she said sadly, watching him flee. Sweetie Belle hissed at the sinister cat as he ran past, which almost made Stephanie jump. Fortunately, Sweetie considered the cat did not stop to pay her any mind. It was had evacuated the premises. Hooray! I wonder if the cat was a he, she, or it? The question was an interesting thought, just as many others were. Absently, Sweetie then reevaluated how she used the word she to label herself. It was strange, but despite what Stephanie had told her about being an it just didn't feel right for some reason. So she decided she was a she. The word, it just sounded incorrect. Sweetie, stop that. He's just a cat after all. Stephanie watched Sweetie turn back around slowly, obviously satisfied that the cat really was gone. It was a small wonder Mr. Whiskers in particular had always held such contempt for her machines. But other than laser pointers, a big distraction, there was little she had been able to do about it. Finding a home for certain pets was difficult after all. Fitting in was never easy, sometimes even under the best circumstances. Sweetie replied to Stephanie, "He? Acknowledged. Yes, he is a cat, but he is anything but just. I remember him always attacking me, almost as far back as I can, and I would do something to make him stop." Her words turned into a slightly wondering, thoughtful question by the end. Stephanie slowly closed the closet door to her left while keeping her eyes glued to Sweetie, who had paused just to look at the floor and hold a hoof up to her metal chin. The sight was nothing short of confusing, surreal, and breathtaking. The worst part was she still didn't know what to do about it. I could spend a lifetime programming and perfecting behavior, but I would never be able to make something behave like this, she marveled. Whoever did it is a genius. She still fought to believe Sweetie's behavior was program-related somehow, though that didn't explain how she reactivated while disconnected from her own batteries. Suddenly, Sweetie's eye lasers activated, washing green light over the carpeted section of hallway floor. "Oh!" she exclaimed. "How interesting! This is the cat decombulizer. How interesting. This is the cat the discombobulator. The cat disc the cat combobulator? That one sounds better. Absently, she began sweeping the green streams of light she seemed to possess around the room. Stephanie coughed nervously, a slight maniac, a slight manic reaction to match how she felt. You're behaving like if this is a prank, please stop. This is going too far. Her hands reached up and raked through her long hair. You're remote controlled, right? She asked desperately. Sweetie Belle looked up, her eyes still all right. Her eyes still alit. Prank? Remote control? Those words are... Oh, wait. That's what the TV had. It made the TV talk, though It, Stephanie corrected immediately, standing perfectly still. The TV is an it. Oh, I understand, Sweetie said simply, then went on. It wasn't very responsive, but I told you that already. Is your memory all right, Stephanie? Quietly, she patted her way over towards Stephanie across the carpet floor separating them. Look who's talking, Stephanie thought to herself, frowning. Yeah, my memory's fine. Thanks for asking. Then winced and closed her eyes slowly. I just thanked the machine. Oh God, what's happening to me? You're welcome. I'm glad to hear you are functioning right. Sweetie replied, then after a brief pause continued. Oh, Stephanie, I just realized. I feel joy when being polite to you. Can you help me feel more other feelings? I like them. Stephanie opened one eye and peered at Sweetie again. She was looking back up at her with an excited expression. Nope, Stephanie thought quietly and quickly, then began walking away. All right, what's next? Hell, of course. Or do I even want to bother? I bet he's screwed up to hell and back. Like as not, likely as not, one more nail in my sanity's coffin is just gonna send me over the deep end. And then who will take care of my animals? Not Alice, that's for sure. Another response from Sweetie caught her off guard, as most of them have. Stephanie, where are you going? Sweetie Belle asked from down the hallway. Stephanie stopped and turned around. And those glitches. It said Hal caused them. Rather than think of what could possibly have happened, because nothing made sense anyway, she surprised herself by thinking of whether Sweetie was actually an it, or rather, she considered it would be like if it really did become a she. What if, she thought, her machine had somehow become intelligent, rather than the far more likely scenario that she was being remote controlled, which itself was literally impossible after having confirmed that no such devices or changes had been found or added to Sweetie the night prior. What if Sweetie wasn't actually now the host of some horrible virus or reprogramming, one of which somehow made her behave in such a way immediate as to imitate behavior? Stephanie? A voice from nearby addressed. What is it, Sweetie? Stephanie replied in a depressed tone, still staring off into space and thinking hard. The flat quality of the robotic voice shifted itself and became rather disapproving. Sweetie? It asked with a hint of concern. Oh, contempt. No. The flat quality of the robotic voice shifted itself and became rather disapproving. Sweetie, it asked with a hint of contempt. As much as I like you and don't like you, as is the case, I wouldn't go so far as to think of myself as your sweetie. Stephanie shook herself and turned to find GLaDOS before the, hanging before her from the ceiling. Anyway, GLaDOS continued, I was just wanting to inform you that something, likely one of your pests, has done a remarkable job of destroying your entire house. It's impressive that it accomplished such a feat, but there it is, still. So I was just checking that this was not some sad attempt at remodeling, which wouldn't surprise me. In any case, I suggest you let me tidy up this place and fix it up for you. Yeah, go for it. Stephanie sighed in response, then turned around to find Sweetie looking up at GLaDOS with a mildly contemptuous look of her own. Weird, she thought, studying the Philibot with interest. Or is it cool? Stephanie frowned and then turned again, headed for the basement. She patted GLaDOS' side as she left. I have no idea what I'm going to do, she quietly remarked to herself. Stephanie continued, well, maybe if I get everything figured out, fixed, and have nothing to worry about as far as Howl in the house. What should I do with Sweetie? I can't turn her off. Do I let her power run out? Try another system restore? Lock her up? Or do I just talk with her and wait? Stephanie flicked on the lights to the basement, while behind her came the soft clip-clop of Sweetie's metal pony hooves and a whining call that went, Stephanie, where are you going? Wait for me! Stephanie shambled down the stairs quickly, ignoring her pleading, bewitched machine. She had been about to call out to Hal, then remembered what had happened the last time Sweetie had encountered stairs. Wait, Sweetie! It was too late. By the time she had turned around, her sudden worst fear had already begun. Sweetie Belle's expression shifted 3 times in a moment it took her to take a couple shaky robotic steps down the stairs. She looked unhappy, still asking for Stephanie to wait, then was smiling the second her eyes locked on her, and then, surprised, now falling down towards the bottom of the stairs. Stephanie lunged instinctively, an arm reached out and another supporting herself. At the last second, she had time to consider how bad of an idea the maneuver was, remembering Sweetie Belle's weight. A mix of gears churning and metal thumping ran out, then quieted after an instant. Sweetie's eyes were wide, but both her and Sweetie, who had managed to stop her fall without help, were all right. What was that, huh? Why didn't you fall? Stephanie panted, then winced. Ow, ribs. Sweetie Belle looked up, then slowly stood up off the stairs. Stephanie, are you hurt? She asked, worried, rather than answered the question. I'm fine. Stephanie stood up quickly, brushing herself off, then gestured a hand back to the hallway. So why didn't you fall? Whoever reprogrammed you must have thought repeating that stupid stairs joke was really funny. Why did you stop yourself? She glared, her fists planted on her hips out of anger. Because I was in the way? Oh, Because I was in the way? Sweetie Belle cringed back some, almost hiding her eyes beneath the remnants of her mane. I don't. The way you're looking at me is scary, Stephanie, was what she muttered. Stephanie blinked, confusion and shock playing across expression in an instant. What? Sweetie Belle looked up at the charge, then smiled. Yeah, that's better. You make that face a lot, but it's still better than the last one. Stephanie grabbed a hold of the railing beside her, worried that at any moment she would tumble down the stairs after losing consciousness from sheer stress. Sweetie continued, still standing at the top of the stairs. Wait. Stephanie, since talking to Hal, walking has been hard. He didn't really help me much like I wanted him to, but I should have known better than to trust him again. He didn't ask me the first time I talked to him. He didn't help me the first time I talked to him either. Oh, sorry, I said him. I meant to say it. Then she giggled and sheepishly tilted her head. Some of the cuteness of it was lost in her charred state, but only some. I'm sorry if you hurt yourself too. I started to lose balance and decided it would be better to lay down rather than fall all the way down after you. Stephanie stared a moment longer, then slowly said, "Oh, okay then." She took a few steps away and descended into the basement. Well, yeah, just, uh, just wait here. I'll be right back up. I promise. She whirled around and thumped down the remaining stairs, away from her all too real and genuine seeming robot. It's okay, Stephanie. You're not going crazy. You're not. You're fine. Everything will be fine. Nothing's wrong. Okay, Sweetie cried out to her. I'll wait here. Please do not injure yourself more, Stephanie. I like you. Stephanie cringed and shuddered. It has to be a prank. It has to be. But who? Why? How? What if it isn't? How do I find out if it isn't? Arg! She had to actively resist thumping her head against the concrete blocks that made up the south wall of her basement lab. Hal? Stephanie cried out, marching towards the computers. Oh, wait, never mind. The lights and machines throughout the entirety of her lab were actually on, as if they had been in use. And that had made her call out for Hal, forgetting it was broken. She looked around herself at the wanton destruction, taking stock of what her machine had apparently gone through. Surprising, Stephanie were the red orbs along each wall, lighting up in unison. After a moment, she jolted to a halt and blinked. Oh, you're on again after all, like Sweetie said. The red orbs, shining brightly throughout the room, continued to remain on as they were, and no response from them came at all. Stephanie frowned, then stepped closer to the camera nearest her. Hal? Are you in there? How bad are things? There was no answer. Come on, status report, please, she begged, almost at the point of being on hands and knees, if it would help. There was a brief pause that stretched, and then Hal's voice came, giving Stephanie immediate blessed relief. Hal spoke, but oddly in a high-pitched tone that sounded as if he were far away, or at the other end of the hallway. The normal bacon's at midnight. The snozberries taste like snozberries. Klaatu, Beranda, Nikto. The meaning of life is... Stephanie only had to listen for a few seconds to her one prized creation after it began rambling to have her short, wonderful moment of relief dashed completely. Hell! Oh no! She ran over to her monitors, hoping desperately she could make things right, only to find each and every screen was bright blue with error messages. Why me? She sat into her computer chair, wishing for a hopeful voice with an answer or explanation that actually made sense. As it was, though, the only voice Stephanie had was Hal, provocatively telling her that red was definitely her color. The upstairs living room was dim for the most part, with the few house-safe animals Stephanie owned mostly asleep or curled up around one another throughout the building, like the little angels they were. All of them were resting peacefully, all of them except, however, for the one robotic counterpart. For the time being, Stephanie merely talked to Sweetie Belle, having the little machine retell its story of the day it had spent wreaking havoc. Sweetie Belle was seated in a chair beside Stephanie, who, for her part, was exhausted, now that she was finished with stressing over her pretty much everything. The day had been long, especially after spending so much time of her day off simply cleaning. But she was almost ready to end it, if not quite yet. For now, her creation was still doing its best to confuse her. While talking, Sweetie Belle stared intently at the dancing firelight in the stone contentment structure on one end of the room. The rapid motions of the heat had an indiscernible pattern, despite her best efforts to figure it out, which was captivating her. All right, prove it then. Play something, Stephanie remarked back to the little thing Sweetie had claimed. She was invested deeply in the conversation. The act of talking with Sweetie Belle as though she wasn't a string of pre-recorded or algorithm-generated responses had actually proven to be quite calming and surprisingly enjoyable. Stephanie couldn't ignore everything she had thought about, but with no answers or clues, what else could she do? Sweetie Belle smiled and looked over, and then replied, Okay, I would like to do that. Stephanie waited patiently, smirking some herself. She genuinely talks and acts like someone who was just familiarizing themselves with things from scratch. Sweetie Belle would repeatedly confess the things that she liked and disliked, on top of giving her opinions or thoughts. It had seemed too strange at first, but as far as Stephanie could tell, they seemed real enough. Ugh. It was odd. Sweetie seemed in some way a robot, some ways a clueless child, and in others quite profoundly aware and intelligent. Stephanie forced herself to put the oddities out of mind again, focusing instead on her own little Pinocchio. On the other comfy chair, Sweetie opened her mouth, as requested, after applying a split-second music. Then, after a split second, music began pouring into the room.
What is love? Oh, baby, don't hurt me no more.
Stephanie stared in amazement, then laughing held up one hand while holding the other over her face. Okay, stop, that's enough. I believe you now. The music cut off abruptly, and Sweetie smiled up at Stephanie proudly. "Told you," she remarked. Stephanie had been talking to and listening about what Sweetie had apparently learned throughout the day. It seemed one of those things included her entire music library from one of her devices. She wasn't sure, but it seemed like Stephanie had used the broken little TV, which was in fact her lab's music player. The thing had been smashed on the floor beside her workbench, another casualty of Sweetie's apparent quest to have questions answered. It had been a long night, and a very long night as Stephanie saw it. After cleaning the entire house as best she could, all the while being followed around by her metal shadow, Sweetie Belle, she had finally managed to sit down and began trying to figure things out, such as they were. The process, she considered, would probably be enjoyable for her if she didn't feel completely exhausted from the mix of cleaning and the futile attempts to repair Hal. Hal worked once again, yes, but a shade of his former glory. Whatever Sweetie had done to him had left his code and system a complete wreck. He could activate, deactivate, and speak a little, if anyone could call it speaking. The room was quiet, Stephanie still laughing quietly, staring with a goofy smile into the fireplace. Sweetie Belle, meanwhile, kept smiling as big as she could, which often didn't feel big enough, and studied the taller being that went by so many names and titles. It was confusing for Sweetie to have so many designations for one Stephanie. Ordering them was a hassle. Still, she felt she was getting the hang of it. It being her very own word. While waiting patiently for the next question, she abruptly organized away more of the things she had been having trouble understanding. Her run-in with Hal had made her head a mess, but it seemed that some work she had managed to put things back in the rightful place. Sweetie Belle, along with hopeful advice from Stephanie, had decided to never again try to use a thing called a cable to talk with other machines. It was her least favorite way of talking. She liked sounds much more, especially music. She wondered yet again why Stephanie or the animals didn't communicate by singing. Singing and songs were rather nice, as she saw it. She waited happily for Stephanie to talk again, though she herself had many more questions. Oddly, Steph seemed appreciate patience over enthusiasm. At the moment, she and Stephanie had an agreement going, that one of them would be allowed to ask one question, which would be followed by a question from the other, and so on. The method had been Stephanie's idea, because her own had kept leaping into things called tangents, apparently. So, Stephanie began to ask, taking her turn at questions again. You really have no idea why you're acting like this? Sweetie Belle switched her smile to a frown. Stephanie, you already asked that one, she chastised, eyelids drooping to indicate exasperation. Yeah, I know, and I also know that if you're a trick, then you wouldn't tell me anyway. Stephanie decided to stare into the fireplace across from her, then, rather than meet Sweetie's over apparent gaze. Sweetie Belle sighed, desperate, obviously not needing to breathe. despite obviously not needing to breathe. She had begun doing it after noticing how much Stephanie did it. Well, to repeat what I said between us, no, I do not know, Stephanie. I remember many things, though, even right up until I woke up, feeling great. Then you asked, what kinds of things? Then I replied. Stephanie interrupted, waving a hand. Yeah. Then you replied, I remember seeing you first and I felt happy. Okay, I remember. She chewed her lip briefly, remembering well that everything Sweetie had been able to tell her boiled down to very little. As best she could figure out, according to Sweetie anyway, her machine had woken up as it was after that insane storm from the night before. Other than a few clues, there was nothing, just the results, which were quite literally impossible. But they were anyway, smiling and laughing with her. Sweetie Belle waited a moment longer, trying to stay patient, then chirped up happily, excited to take her turn. Okay, I have a question. May I ask it now? She tilted her head, waiting, then noticed that Stephanie seemed to be doing the thing she did when being slightly unresponsive, staring blankly at the wall. Luckily, Sweetie had also learned the trick to getting her friend's attention. It had worked with a 100% success ratio. Sweetie Belle turned her hand, gears rotating her to face towards something randomly chosen out of the room. Ooh, she began to say, in mild false fascination. This thing looks really interesting. Stephanie blinked and straightened up. Sweetie, don't touch that. Oh, sorry, I meant. She trailed off, realizing she had been had by Sweetie's cleverness, which was something that simultaneously confused and amazed her. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking. Sweetie Belle smirked back at her, then added, I like thinking, but talking is nicer. Stephanie smiled some herself and relaxed back against her chair. Yeah, it is. I think you've reminded me just how much I like conversation, actually. Sweetie Belle's tail began to wag absently. Really? She asked happily. Stephanie nodded. Yes, I mean, I talk all day to my supervisors and other employees, but I should probably get out more with my friends. Sweetie gasped. Friends? Amigos? Can I come? I would like more friends, and she froze in her speech quickly and let out a sound of disappointment. Oh no, I asked another question and it wasn't my turn yet. Again, was it? I'm sorry. Wincing, she looked away and tried to hide, feeling shame again. Shame wasn't her favorite feeling, she had decided. Light-hearted laughter made Sweetie Belle pick her head up again. She found Stephanie leaning over her knees with both hands clasped together. You are just too cute, you know that? I thought I had made you incredibly adorable before, but now you're just a walking heart attack waiting to happen. Stephanie's voice was full of admiration for a change. She reached out a hand and ruffled Sweetie's mane, who wore a surprised look. Is that a good thing? Sweetie asked back. Oh no, I asked another question. Unable to bear her own foolishness any longer, she ducked low and brought her front hooves up over her eyes and head. Hiding, that's what she was doing. And it felt like the perfect answer to her problem. Oddly, however, more laughter made her peek out again. Stephanie was smiling still and spoke up in view. It's fine. Really, just don't get out of control with questions, Sweetie Belle. Okay? Try to be reasonable and use moderation. After a moment, she asked, "Could I trust you to do that?" It felt odd to ask her own machine an involved question, but she was getting over it. Sweetie Belle let out another tiny gasp. "Yes, I will try." She thought about the way Stephanie had been treating her differently. It didn't take long. Many of the things stood out as strange for her, from the way Stephanie had addressed her earlier to the questions she had asked. Something had changed, though, over the course of the day. "Good," Stephanie replied. "As for meeting my friends, you already have, a lot, though it was before recent events." Sweetie Belle stared a moment, then tilted her head. "I have? Oh, well, maybe I could re-meet them? I think that I'm different now, and I want to do things over. I want to do new things too." Stephanie smiled wanly, thinking over the implication of a machine with its own mind. "That sounds nice," she replied quietly. "I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do with her," she reminded herself. "Gosh, what do I do with a true AI?" She had thought about making true AI once, but it was difficult to quantify what made life life. Setting the simple programs of funny little responses apart from true conscious thought was something that was hardly easy, and even more difficult to define properly. "Figures," Stephanie mused. "I'm the one person on Earth not trying to make a machine with a mind of its own, and I somehow end up with one." She leaned back, enjoying the bit of quiet momentarily in the room, then surprised herself with a big yawn. Sweetie Belle whirred, straightening up to sit taller. "Stephanie, are you okay?" Her friend had made a strange sound, one that wasn't words and could possibly be indicative of several distressing things. "What was that?" she asked, just to be sure. Stephanie had proven to be a valuable source of information, and checking things with her was better than assumptions. Stephanie stood up, stretching. Uh, yeah, sweetie, I'm fine. That was just a yawn." "You do it when you're tired." Sweetie Belle stared, eyes widening slightly. "Oh." She paused to think about what tired was, then frowned and looked up. "I don't think I'm tired." The definition confused her slightly. Tired, feeling the need to rest or sleep. "Hmm. Nope, none of that." Stephanie chuckled. "I doubt you would be." "Well, I am, and it's late. We've been at it for hours, so I'm going to bed, I think." She briefly looked over her machine, wondering just what exactly she could do with it now. It certainly seemed that telling Sweetie Belle to go power down wasn't an option anymore, after all. "Bed?" Sweetie asked. "What is the reason for bed, may, if I may ask?" Her eyes shifted around, as if unsure of asking the correct question to begin with. Stephanie smirked in response. "Bed's where you go when it's time to sleep. I'm a person, like I explained to you, so I need to sleep." But I don't, Sweetie Belle explained, remembering the way Stephanie had explained pronouns and what people were. It didn't entirely make sense, but people and animals needed rest in order to stay healthy. It was all very interesting. I remember. You will be unresponsive for several hours, huh? Her ears turned backwards, drooping in disappointment. But I wanted to talk more, she lamented. Stephanie frowned a little. We will, but more importantly, can I trust you not to repeat what happened today while I'm sleeping? As she spoke, she stood up, leaving her chair and turned off the fireplace. From there, she made her way to her bedroom. Sweetie Belle watched Stephanie go, then carefully looked over the edge of her own chair and hopped down, following. I said I would not investigate things so intensely, didn't I? Stephanie had a funny way of repeating things, Sweetie noted. What can I do while you sleep? The new question was quite genuine, as she really had no idea. There was always exploring what lay beyond the house, which according to her memory was quite big and full of interesting stuff. Stephanie hummed, brow furrowed in worry. Well, I could put you in the basement with some music playing. Would that be fun? Sweetie Belle slowed for a moment, considering the proposition. I don't know, Stephanie. Maybe. Maybe? Stephanie stopped and opened the basement door. Great. All right. Your legs and stuff are still acting up, aren't they? Let me help you down there. Sweetie Belle made a noise to protest before responding. No, it's all right. I think I fixed what Hal and I broke in me. It wasn't too hard, but Stephanie, Sweetie Belle made a noise of protest before responding. No, it's all right. I think I fixed what Hal and I broke in me. It wasn't too hard, but Stephanie, can I stay up here with you? Stephanie frowned in the twilight of her hallway, considering the ultimatum. Well, that's good to hear, but no, sweetie. After today, I would really prefer it if you stayed downstairs. If you're still malfunctioning, it's just safer for both of us, I think. Sweetie Belle looked down into the dark basement. Safer? She asked, a slight twist in the word. Because I broke so many things today, and it's... Things and it's... Things and it's? Stephanie rolled her eyes. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Just let me learn more about you, okay? She leaned down to meet Sweetie's eyes. There's a lot I don't know, and so far you've been, well, accidentally been causing trouble, we'll say. It was still impossible that it was purposeful or someone's prank, but there wasn't a way to know. Sweetie stared up at Stephanie. She idly wondered how long she'd be able to watch her if she didn't speak. Eventually, though, Stephanie asked, Well, is that all right? Sweetie frowned a little, then smiled and turned towards the door. Okay. I want double questions tomorrow, though. Stephanie stared a moment until Sweetie looked back up at her, then barked a laugh. So young and already making deals and bargaining. All right, deal. The bedroom was quiet, calm, and completely undisturbed. There was a cat curled up on the bottom of Stephanie's bed. sound asleep, just as she was, until that is, the sound of her door being pushed open woke her up. Accompanying the creak of the door was a soft, mechanical noise. A moment later, and a hushed whisper woke Stephanie up entirely. "Stephanie, are you awake?" it asked in a careful tone. Stephanie leaned up when the noise finally became its loudest, and she could feel the end of the bed begin to dip slightly from the weight pressing down on the mattress. "Why am I not surprised?" she asked herself tiredly. "Sweetie Belle?" She sat up, examining the darkness and finding the outline of a little body approaching her. Sweetie Belle was slowly making her way over the bed's covers, as if hesitant. "Stephanie," she said imploringly. "What are you doing?" Stephanie questioned slowly, not fully awake. Sweetie tilted her head, then looked around herself at the bed and room before facing Stephanie again. "I'm sitting on this piece of furniture talking to you." "No, no, sweetie." Stephanie sat up more and exhaled. The tired breath had built itself from successfully being asleep to suddenly not being asleep. "I meant, what are you doing in my room? I'm trying to sleep here." "Didn't I tell you to stay in the lab? I mean, didn't we have a deal?" Sweetie Belle looked up and shifted her front legs for a moment. Stephanie waited again, struck by how odd and out of place those actions were when used by her machine. Stranger than those were the way her eyelids tilted, as though she were embarrassed or sad. "That's going to take a lot of getting used to," she reflected, with no response coming from her robot other than movement. She tried prompting her to speak in the way you would with a person. "Sweetie, what's wrong? You look, worried." Sweetie Belle looked up, a little hesitant to be truthful about the way she felt. That alone confused her, like many other things, but the feeling inside was unpleasant, too. Unpleasantness wasn't a familiar concept to her, though neither were any others. Sweetie began to hesitate already. After a little smile from Stephanie, though, she continued, "I think I was scared." The word popped into her head. It sounded about right, so she went on. "It was dark in the basement, Stephanie, and Hal is asleep still and won't talk. But that doesn't seem like it would help the dark. I don't care about double questions, Stephanie. Please let me stay. I would like to stay." Stephanie stared openly at Sweetie, who returned her stricken gaze with a cute one. "So," Stephanie began, "you were afraid of the dark?" she stated. Sweetie blinked, then nodded 3 times quickly in succession. In her head she ran over quickly just how scary being scared was. She definitely didn't enjoy it. Stephanie, meanwhile, considered that being afraid of the dark was normal enough, certainly, but for humans, especially children, not machines. Then again, what was Sweetie, she wondered. Another sigh escaped her. Then she ran a hand over the little robot's ruined mane. "If I turn on the lights in the basement, will you stay put and let me get some sleep? It's been a long day, and I didn't sleep as much as I would like to last night." Sweetie Belle thought over what Stephanie said. It was quite It wasn't quite what she had hoped to hear. I was hoping, actually, that maybe I could stay here with you. May I? Stephanie stayed quiet for a while. So Sweetie began moving her tail from side to side, something that seemed to help convince her of things. Sure enough, she could see some of the telltale signs in Stephanie's figures suggesting she was probably going to say yes. And that, everpony, is Chapter 8. Next up, Chapter 9. But first, holy cow, this one was a long one. 8,392 words, and the whole thing took up about 23 pages of a Word document. All in all, the whole entire recording lasted over an hour. Oh man. Well,